There have been many Zelda games to come out over the years. Many fan favorites like Ocarina or Breath of the Wild really stand out to people. But one of the games that gets overshadowed that I think needs more attention is Twilight Princess. This game originally came out for the GameCube and Wii as a cross-gen title, and then a few years later it came out as a remaster, Twilight Princess HD, for the Wii U. For some of us, it's our favorite Zelda game, but you don't really hear people talk about it too much, and that's what I'm going to be talking about today, giving you a little insight into what's great about this game and why you should go check it out if you haven't. I'm Derek, and welcome to Position Offset. Within the pantheon of Zelda games, many people have their favorite. Some started out on the NES with the original, some people on the Super Nintendo with Link to the Past. Maybe Ocarina on Nintendo 64 was your first. That was mine. But for some people, they haven't even played these games. They've only played the more recent Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom. And so today I'd like to bring some attention to Twilight Princess, the game that came out for Wii and Wii U. It was basically a cross-gen game, came out after Wind Waker, but before we got to Skyward Sword. And so as we dig into the game, a lot of the aspects of the game in modern day probably don't seem anything special, but at the time, many of these things were brand new. They had not really been done in a Zelda game, or not done to the extent they were in this game. One thing that struck me at the time was just how much more story the game had. Sure, there was story in the prior Zeldas, building up with each one, but if you compare it to, say, Ocarina, the dialogue is much more dense. There are more characters that have more intricate stories and different arcs that you keep up with over the course of the game. It was just a much more detailed story than we had ever seen in a Zelda at that point. But luckily, it wasn't as dense as, say, a Final Fantasy JRPG type game. It was, you could say, just enough story, or just the right amount of story for a Zelda game, at least in my opinion. However, looking back at it, one critique I could give it is that the intro is fairly long. It's probably about 10 minutes before you even start controlling Link. But otherwise, it's got a slow intro, but it's going to build and build. I don't want to tell you too many details about the story, of course. There's so many things I could spoil, but I'm not. That's not what this video is for. I'm not going to tell you that. But let's just say the story goes to some places that we don't normally see in a Zelda game. There was a bit of a darker tone to this game. It had, I hate to use this word, but a more mature tone than the prior Zeldas. It was like they were kind of trying to appeal to an older audience, but just slightly. It's just a little bit. It's still your pretty classic Zelda game in tone. It's just got this little bit of darkness around the edges, and it just kind of frames it in this very interesting style. We get introduced to the shadowy Twilight realm and the strange creatures that live there. And of course, our own Link gets turned into basically a werewolf. Not really a werewolf per se, more of just an actual wolf that he kind of morphs into. But luckily, that's not the whole game. It's you play as regular Link most of the time, but you have this wolf form for special quests and different parts of the story, and we'll just leave it at that for now. But when you see these kind of ghostly characters about you and just the art direction that they put into this game, it's a very different, I don't want to say Tim Burton-y kind of feel, but I'm not going to say goth either. It's just, a little bit of a darker, it's its own thing. And not only do we have this darker tone in terms of the look and the story, but we also have this kind of darker tone in the music. The music in this game, like most Zelda games, was wonderful. And I can only play a few seconds due to copyright, but I will try to feature a few somewhere around here in the video. And so now gameplay-wise, it really didn't do a whole lot super new at the time. It was more or less the same formula we had gotten in Ocarina and Wind Waker before it, but they refined the controls. Everything was super tight, very clean, just precise controls. Everything was very polished in terms of the controls because instead of trying to do a whole lot of new things in the core gameplay, they really focused on doing a lot of mini-games. You had a variety of different types of mini-games to give you a lot of interesting new things to do, but your core, jumping and slashing and everything was fairly run-of-the-mill for the time, but, also not as intricate and involved as the modern Zeldas with Breath of the Wild. And if you played this game on the Wii, you were forced to use motion controls, which not everybody loves. You would have to waggle your controller anytime you wanted to slash your sword, and you probably got a better experience if you played this on GameCube or later on the Wii U, where that wasn't a requirement. And then in terms of the world, it kind of followed that same structure that we got in Ocarina, where you've got basically an open world, but much smaller scale than we think of when we say open worlds these days. But it was a fairly open area that you could go freely about to different sections of the map. And it was fairly large. I would say plenty large. I don't really love how big the new Zelda games have gotten. I feel like this game was almost just right in terms of not being too big or too small for the world. And now, I kind of touched on the tone of the game, but let's talk about the actual aesthetic graphically that they used in this game. There was a lot of controversy back in the days, a lot of back and forth on the internet, heated debates between people about which looked better, the cartoonish style that they went to in Wind Waker or the so-called more realistic style they went back to for this game. When Nintendo had introduced Wind Waker, there was a lot of negative feedback coming from some of the gamers that they didn't love the direction that they were going on. They liked the style that Ocarina and Majora had put in place and that they had been shown prior the year at Space World 2000. That demo left a lasting impression in people's minds, and so when that game never came out, a lot of people were disappointed, and so this game was kind of the answer to those people's frustrations. This was the game that was going to be what these fans were asking for. Obviously, not everybody. Many people enjoyed Wind Waker, but a significant portion of people had complained enough that Nintendo made this move. You look at interviews, it almost seems like it was a begrudging move that they didn't want to make. They didn't really want to go back to this style. They were enjoying the cartoonish style, and they felt kind of forced into it. That's, going to depend on who you talk to at Nintendo, of course. Everybody's got different feelings, but that was the way I remember reading about it in the news and magazines and things of the time. But if you want to hear more about that whole story on how this game's aesthetic came to be, check out Camobot's The Greatest Hype Cycle video, which I should have linked above here, or over there. And then you can look at Breath of the Wild, where it seems like they've tried to come to a compromise, where now you've got the slightly more realistic style of models and details, but it's got the cell shading applied to it. But back to Twilight Princess, this game, people refer to it as a more realistic style, but it really was more realistic in the technical graphics aspects, like the more realistic lighting and shading, more realistic textures. The shape of the characters was actually still very cartoonish. In fact, a lot of the different NPCs you would interact with had very not real faces. And so it was cartoonish still, even though it was less cartoonish than Wind Waker. So yeah, I don't know what to call it today in the modern age, as graphics have gotten much more intense in terms of what we can do in realistic fidelity. But this game, now when we look at it, I feel weird calling it realistic because it doesn't really look realistic at all. And now the other thing to talk about in the aesthetic is this game introduced this kind of pseudo sci-fi look that still lingers in the game today whenever we see weird technologies and things. In this game, you would see characters with little strips on them that glow much like you would see on a character in Tron. And so that, along with the darker tone, definitely made this Zelda feel a bit different than what we had seen before. And so last, I'll touch on my own personal experience. I'm gonna have to admit it. I was a young teenager at the time, and I was part of the camp that didn't really enjoy the Wind Waker look. I kind of felt like it was a step back in the fidelity of the game, especially after seeing what we had seen at Space World in the demo. That game looked amazing, and being told we weren't going to get it was pretty frustrating at the time. So now, I'm older and wiser, and of course, I've gone back and played Wind Waker, and it's a great game, and I was, silly to think that at the time. But not everybody has come around. I imagine there's still some people out there that never went back and gave that game a shot. And that's fairly sad, so go check out both of those games, because they're both great games. And so I also had the misfortune of playing on the Wii and having to do all the stupid motion controls, which I can't stand. Another thing I didn't really love in my experience were these creepy little Uchu guys. They were just freaky looking. Kind of makes you just viscerally cringe looking at them the first time you see them. Sorry for having to make you see it for the first time now if you haven't. And then, I was annoyed by this little dude named Mallow. He looks like a little baby, but he talks like a grown-up. And yeah, his story gets interesting, and he turns out to be a pretty cool guy eventually. But I was really irritated with that guy when I first entered the game. But one of these days, I'm going to be replaying this game one day really soon, and that's what I'll talk about next. Hopefully, we're going to be getting a remake or remaster or something to that effect where you can play this game on the Switch, maybe on the Switch 2 as an exclusive. There have been rumors going around for a while that remasters of Wind Waker and Twilight Princess were in the works, but still to date, nothing has come from Nintendo. I think probably at least 2, maybe even 3 years now I've been hearing these, and it doesn't seem like Nintendo's ready to tell us anything. But now that we've got the new Direct coming up in April, and of course probably more Directs after that, of course, I think that this year they're not going to have a brand new Zelda. It takes a long time to make a mainline Zelda game, and we're probably not seeing that till like 2028, 5 years after Tears of the Kingdom came out. But we still are going to probably get some kind of Zelda game this year, and a remaster of this sort would probably be perfect, especially since currently Wind Waker and Twilight Princess are the 2 Zelda games you can't play on the Switch. Pretty much every other version is available. And so in some of the rumors, people were talking about it being a bundle pack where you get both games. I don't think Nintendo's going to do that. I'm not really sure why they would do that, honestly. But what I do think we could see is sometime this year, we find out that Wind Waker Remastered is coming to the Switch, playable on Switch 1 and Switch 2. And then next year, in 2026, well, it's going to be the 20th anniversary of the game, so what a perfect year to release a remaster or a full-blown remake if they want to take advantage of the Switch 2 and make it exclusive. I'm going to lay out 2 scenarios here. One's realistic and one's more just my wish. What's probably going to happen is we'll get the game, able to be played at 4K, and the textures might get some extra cleanup. Maybe they'll go back and redo some of the models and make them a little bit better, but for the most part, they're not going to completely redo this game. That is the faster, cheaper way to get this done, and I think that's probably what Nintendo would do. But what I hope is that they will go back and do a full-blown remake on this game. Make it the exact same game. Don't change up the gameplay or anything like that. Everything should be the same in terms of the actual things that make it a video game. But in terms of graphics, they could redo all the models with, smoother, higher polygon models. They could bring in a little bit more in the world. You don't want to make it too realistic because, once again, this game is somewhere between cartoonishness and realism. You don't want full realism here, but they could get better lighting and all sorts of things like that going. And I think one thing that a lot of people would appreciate that they've recently added to some of the Zelda games is voice acting. Now, there are plenty of games that come out with no voice acting and you just have to read the text, and a lot of people like that. I'm fine with that. But I do know some people not so big a fan. So Nintendo, if they really want to sell big numbers of this, that would probably be something that could make it appeal to a wider audience. But whether or not they put a whole ton of effort into it or just enough effort into it, I think Nintendo's going to do a good job on this, and it's going to be great. But if it's coming out this year, next year, or sometime after that, we'll just have to wait and see what Nintendo tells us. And so if we get that remake, I hope all of you go check it out. It's a great game. It's completely underrated. And if you can't, then maybe go out and find an old copy for the Wii U or the Wii or the GameCube if you still have one of those systems available to you. But this is the end of the video. So if you enjoyed this, please give the video a like, subscribe to the channel, and thanks for watching. So this is a video I've been wanting to make for a while. Zelda Twilight Princess is probably my favorite Zelda game. Definitely left a big impression on me at the time. I guess almost 19 years ago. now. I haven't really played it since then. I've gone back and watched a few Let's Plays and stuff to kind of refresh myself for this video, but a lot of this is going off of nearly 20-year-old memories, so I am excited to get to play it again sometime myself, and I'm hoping that's going to be on a nice 4K friendly version on my Switch too. But yeah, I've tried out a few new things with the lighting and stuff here. Hopefully the quality's turned out okay. I actually had to re-record this video because the first attempt just didn't work. It was very blurry and yeah. But anyway, thanks for sticking around, and as always, I'll see you next time.